You cannot help but see that this one who's coming is simply called the Word. In the beginning was the Word. We might say, in the beginning was God's self-expression. In the beginning, God expressed himself. In the beginning was God's self-expression, and this self-expression was with God, God's own fellow. And this self-expression was God, God's own self. And already your heart begins to flutter and your mind wonders what's going on here. How do you think in those terms? But that's what the text says. This one who becomes flesh, who takes on human identity, is one with God, God's own agent in creation, God's own self. Even the term word is an interesting choice, isn't it? How do you think about Jesus? What title is adequate for him? I can imagine in John's head going round and round various titles and names and expressions that could be used. And he remembers, for example, that in the Old Testament, we read again and again, the word of the Lord came to the prophet saying, so God has disclosed himself in revelation. Or you remember John 1, God spoke and something came into being. By the word of the Lord, the heavens were made. God's word in creation. Even God's word in saving people, transforming people. God sent forth his word and he healed them, quoting from the Psalms. All these things that God's word accomplishes, he reveals, he creates, he transforms, and he thinks, yes, that's the appropriate expression that summarizes all who Jesus is. He's God's self-expression. He is there with God in the beginning. God is one, and yet there is a complexity in him from the very beginning. This word is God's own fellow. And he's God's own self.